Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness.
Hello girls, and welcome back to another episode of the Women's Fitness Academy's podcast. I'm your host, Siggy, one of the WFA's educators and a women's body image and fitness coach. Today, I'm joined by the lovely Sami Rose. And for those who don't know who Sami is, she is a registered counsellor, a weight-inclusive personal trainer, and an online coach from Brisbane, Australia. Sami's main areas of specialty are in binge eating and body image issues, but she also provides general counselling, which helping her clients manage their stress and anxiety and navigating life's hurdles, align more with their values, and live a life that they truly allow them to thrive. Sami, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat.
I'm so freaking excited about today's chat, and I want to open today's conversation about what made you want to become a registered counsellor.
Oh, I love this question. I actually never planned to become a counsellor. So I have been running my online health and fitness coaching business since 2015. And I have kind of changed and evolved over the years, and definitely started with like the 8-week challenges and a lot of kind of fat loss focused stuff. I went through my own kind of journey, and as I sort of gradually changed into wanting a more balanced approach, I wanted to offer that more for my clients. So the kind of clients that I was attracting did have more kind of like eating concerns, body image issues, a little bit of sort of binge eating here and there. And I was finding that some things were a little outside of my scope that I had to kind of refer out. But sometimes it was more just a case of the clients, we had a really good working relationship. In their check-ins, they'd tell me really personal stuff and, difficulties that they're experiencing in life that would, increase their stress levels or make it more difficult to adhere to the program. And I wanted to find a way to better support them. So I originally just wanted to do a diploma of counselling just to kind of learn those skills in terms of like motivational interviewing, how to kind of talk through some of these difficulties and provide coping tools as just an add-on to my coaching business. So I never kind of set out to be a counsellor, and especially kind of in the broader general sense of counselling. But when I did my placement, I started trialing with clients as just kind of a free practice kind of thing. I was like, wow, I actually really love this. So I was really blessed to be able to start working where I did my placement initially, and got heaps of experience there. And now I work completely for myself, exclusively online. So I do a bit of a mix of counselling and coaching. So it's definitely a great value add to my coaching, and I can, really dive a little deeper in some of the coaching calls with clients that, have stuff pop up here and there. But it's nice to also mix it up and have clients on the counselling side of things that aren't specifically about health and fitness as well. So it's nice, breaks up my week.
I love that. It's like combining the both into, well, I guess it's like using both modalities into the one service of yours, which is so helpful.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely come in handy, especially over the years where I have focused more on things like relationship with food and body image more so than like I've strategically moved away from things like calorie counting, macros, all of that stuff to really create balance. So a lot of the clients that I attract are clients who had a similar background to me, where they had been on the like super shreddy challenges and all of these diets and had a lot of those kind of disordered or diet culture-y negative traits that sometimes do come with those processes. Not always, obviously, but I was attracting a lot of people that had those difficulties and had that experience. So I just really wanted a way to kind of tap into the mindset side of things and help them find that balance and really sort of zoom out and see the broader picture of their lifestyle, so that it's a little bit more wellness coaching than just training and nutrition, I guess, as such. And, we dive deeper into sleep and stress management and all that good stuff. So yeah, it's been really helpful for me to feel like I'm doing, I guess, a more like well-rounded approach.
It's so useful to have as part of like the coaching side of things. And like you said, by you transitioning and growing through your own journey, you have noticed that a lot of the clients that you were attracting were suffering from that binge eating, journey. So while we're on that topic, for those who don't know, what is your background with your own personal health and fitness journey?
Well, it started probably like 10 or so years ago now, maybe a little more. I found myself just in a position where I was not feeling good in my body. I had gained a bunch of weight after like a really bad breakup. I was in my 20s. I was, not in the greatest place in terms of looking after myself. So I'd kind of gone on a bit of a health kick, which turned into a diet, which turned into another diet. And, it was relatively healthy and balanced, I guess, in the beginning, but I definitely got a little more obsessive over time. And at one point I went with a friend to watch her sister compete in a bodybuilding competition. She was in the, I think, fitness division. And I was like, hey, okay, like these people look really confident and happy. And I've been on this health kick and I, want to see if I can get abs like them. Like, let's just kind of push for this last stretch to lose, the last however many kilos I wanted to lose. So I started competing. My first prep began in 2014. And I got on stage for the first time May 2015. And I ended up in the 2 years following that. I did 9 shows in a 2-year period. So my last show was March of 2017. I finished on the Arnold Classic. And that was a really grueling experience. Like anyone listening that has competed or, preps clients to compete knows, like it's a very demanding kind of hobby. Lots of benefits that come with it, obviously. And there was a lot of fun and a lot of learning and self-growth and like cool to see what my body could do for sure. But I definitely fell into the trap of a lot of disordered eating habits, which, to be honest, were like something I had battled with prior to competing anyway. So they didn't necessarily cause it, but probably worsened it, I guess, just kind of like really tunnel visioned a lot of those habits into a short period of time. So when I stopped competing and I'd been basically in a calorie deficit for 2 years straight with only like a week or 2 break here and there, I really swung the other way and had a lot of issues with binge eating. And in the first 3 or so months of like being post-show, I gained, I think, like 12 kilos in like 12 weeks or something. So it was quite a lot in a short period of time. I was still like totally normal body size. Like I'm quite a tiny person and I was very, very lean when I competed. So I absolutely needed to gain weight, but it wasn't in the healthiest way and I was really struggling. I kept trying to like be good again tomorrow and compensate, or I'm going to track my macros again, and then I'd get halfway through the day and I'd be triggered and I'd end up in the wormhole and like throw my fitness pal away and do it all again the next day. And it was just this really awful cycle for a couple of months that I just did not know how to get out of. I was trying to kind of seek help and there wasn't really anyone at the time that I could find that was specializing in these areas. I went and saw a psychologist and I tried to get hypnosis and all these things and it just was not helping. So I did a lot of kind of just my own learning and tried to sort of heal myself, which was a slower process than I guess what I for my clients now. But in the end, I found my balance again. I gained even a little bit more weight in that process. And so I'm pretty much back to like the highest weight I was almost when I first started my fitness journey. But I have like this whole different appreciation for my body and a really great relationship with food and with exercise and looking after myself. So it's like less of a focus on my body, I guess, now, and more on just living life in a way that is like genuinely healthy and balanced for me. So it's been like a huge roller coaster, but I think experiencing that really quite intense period where I was struggling with binge eating gave me so much understanding for, what my clients come to me for now. So that's why I wanted to specialize in that area when I was doing my counseling studies. I studied with the Australian Centre for Eating Disorders. So, I really dug into where I could try and be the person that I needed at the time. And it's, really nice to kind of come full circle and be in a genuinely good place now where I can share those insights and those strategies with other people. And it's been wonderful to partner with some other coaches and personal trainers as well to kind of have them refer their clients to me when it's outside of their scope, and work really cohesively together to really benefit their clients and help them where they're feeling really stuck. So it's very rewarding.
You know what? It's really, like, as you mentioned, like it is really rewarding to see how far we've come in our own journey. And like you mentioned, from everything that you have gone through, you're literally able to help your clients collapse time by not making the same mistakes that you did back then.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I wish I had all of the tools that I have now. Because yeah, I definitely could have used them back then. And it was, yeah, such an interesting experience, I guess, to kind of have to do a lot of that work on my own and get really introspective and just kind of understand the why behind what I was doing. But yeah, now I have many a shortcut and great insights and things that I can share. So it's a much more like structured experience where I have kind of almost like not necessarily a set program because it's very much individualized client by client, but I have a few key like strategies and activities and little homework things that I can give to clients that I know like absolutely work and make it so much faster and more effective than what I went through myself. So it's kind of like a little bit healing in itself to be able to kind of do what I wish I could have had someone help me do back then.
100%. I can so relate to that because years ago I had suffered from eating disorders as well. And then, going through that heartache of trying to figure out like, why am I restricting myself? Why am I binging? Why am I relying so much on, the calorie counting and going like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And it may have been, several months or years, whatever everyone's journey is like. For you to just find that peace right now, it's so empowering.
Yeah, it is. And it's just a really nice feeling to not have that constant thought in my head every day about what am I going to eat? How many calories is this? Should I do this? Do I need to burn it off? Like that was just so all consuming back then for me. And it was like every decision that I made in the day revolved around that. Like what time was I going to take my lunch break so that I could plan, like, do I have enough time to cook between clients? And then when am I going to the gym? And can I do this like social thing that this person's invited me to? Like, where will I fit in my training? And it was so exhausting that I don't even know how I did it for so long. But now it's great. Like I definitely don't train as much as I used to. I wouldn't even say I don't eat as well as I used to because I eat plenty of veggies. I'm like mindful of my protein, all that good stuff. But I definitely eat more foods that I enjoy, and I eat probably a high calorie intake, I guess, a lot more than what I was prepping. But I eat for energy, I eat for enjoyment. Like absolutely, I eat for nutrients and fuel and all that stuff. But I don't like live off lettuce and air, and that's really nice.
Bloody lettuce. Oh my God.
The giant bowls of lettuce that I used to call a salad were just so
Salad.
sad. And salad is one thing that I've really had to make peace with over time because I think I had made them so boring and so awful for so long, where it was literally just lettuce and spinach and like, remember those Walden Farms like calorie-free dressings that are just
Yeah.
an absolute like chemical shitstorm and they taste gross anyway, or like fat-free dressing that was like 10 calories and I'd have a tiny little bit of like plain chicken and it was just like the scraping of that, like this boring salad. And I couldn't eat salad for a really long time. I was like, ew, no, it's rabbit food, it's like diet food. And I was almost had like a triggering like phobia of certain foods that I used to eat a lot of, and same with egg whites. I used to eat so many egg whites and it took me a really long time to not see them as like a yucky diet food and to actually like enjoy using egg whites. But now I'm like, oh my God, I love salad again. It's so nice to be able to eat salad and like put things in it that taste so good and enjoy like all of the nutrients that are in it and like a great like delicious size, but it doesn't have to be a bowl of lettuce the size of my head because that's all that will fill me up. Like I actually put things in it that will fill me up and like hit the spot. So yeah, it's funny, all of those things that I kind of have to keep undoing some of those learnings and those habits that I adopted.
100%. Mine is tuna and rice.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it sounds like a very bro, like bodybuilding thing. And rice cakes too. Rice cakes is another
Yes.
one for me. I was like, oh, I ate so many rice cakes on prep. Like, I was a little scarred. Now I'm like, great, give me some like jam and butter on them. Yum.
Yeah. It's so true. Like nowadays, I love rice cakes, but I can so relate to that because back
Yeah.
then, when, we were dieting, that's literally like the only, carb source that you'd be allowed to have.
Yeah. It was not a fun time.
No, not at all. You mentioned earlier that there was a time where you found yourself being a little bit obsessive with the calorie counting, the food consumption. Where do you think that stemmed from?
I think part of it was just that I did kind of have to be really on top of it when I was going through this bodybuilding period. Obviously, like I had a goal. It was my like passion, my sport. I was, building my social media following at the time as well as I was competing too, because back in sort of 2014, 2015, it wasn't an everywhere thing like it is now. So not that I was like one of the first or anything like that, but I don't think a lot of people were sharing their journeys on Instagram around competing when I started. So that's where I picked up a lot of my following, and I just had all of these eyes on me. So I felt this kind of not really pressure specifically from other people. I think it came from myself that I assumed that there was pressure, and I was like, oh my God, all these people are watching me and they're writing goals on my photos, and I have abs and I'm on the explore page, when that was a really big thing that could just like go through the roof. So I feel like I really just got so sucked into the rigidity of that just as an element of control, to be like, well, I felt like all of my kind of luck and success and Instagram growth and business growth was all hinging on the fact that I now had abs. And so I kind of boxed myself into a corner and thinking like, well, now I need to maintain this or else it's all going to go away. And so I had, curated this story in my head of like, well, if I gain weight, if I don't have abs, if I'm not that girl on the explore page with the six pack, this lumpy little like cheese grater abs, then, no one's going to want to work with me as a coach and all that stuff. So I had felt like I had to keep going, and I just was like trying to get a tighter and tighter and tighter grip over time. So I think it just kind of spiraled. There wasn't any one thing that it was like a switch flipped and I was like all of a sudden restrictive. It was definitely over a period of years really that I just kind of didn't know where the line was and couldn't see that I was falling into some really unhealthy behaviors. So when I stopped competing and I was going through that kind of couple of months of really intense binge eating, I was like initially trying to track, and I kept it was almost re-triggering me again because I was putting my food in and I was like still hungry. And if I thought that I was like at too many calories for the day, like in my head, what I think I should have been able to kind of have the willpower to stop at, then I would be like, well, stuff it, I've already eaten too much, and just totally go the other way. So I did have to have a really long break from tracking in order to heal, which is something in most cases I recommend for people who are struggling with binge eating. Not always, depends on what the individual's triggers are, but a lot of the time working on more mindful eating and taking a less numbers-based approach can be really helpful in improving your relationship with food. I eventually did start tracking again when I was in a really good headspace. I never really have been on another big cut or anything like that. I had little mini kind of 4 to 8 week bursts here and there, post-holiday things like that, where I do my own little challenges. But it's been a really long time now since I've tracked any calories or macros. I just eat totally intuitively, mindfully. I've learned so much, obviously, in my time tracking that I could probably tell you all of the calories and macros of what I eat for the most part off the top of my head if I really got quizzed on it. But I don't even think of it. It doesn't even really occur to me. I know what makes me feel really good. I know what maybe I don't always want to eat, but that my body benefits from. So I kind of really try and squeeze in veggies and protein where I can. But it's, a lot more relaxed and definitely nowhere near what it was when I was just so focused on living based on a calculator.
And you know what, by you talking about this, I can feel this sort of weight coming off your shoulders, not having to rely on the calculation side of things, or when your next when your next meal would be. But so many people can relate to this, because too often when we do see women in this fitness journey, they're all relying on calorie counting. They're all relying on hitting their goals. So for you to step away from the calorie counting, how did that look like for you?
It was really scary, honestly, because I think I had built this reliance for so long. And literally, I remember when I saw a psychologist through this period she didn't specialize in this area, so it didn't end up being really helpful. But I remember just saying to her, I just want to learn how to eat like a normal person. I just want to be able to go out for dinner for something that's not, that I haven't weighed or counted or pre-looked at the menu to make sure that it's fitting in my macros, and just have something like sushi and not go home and binge. I want to just be able to eat things because I want to eat them. So in trying to kind of undo my reliance on macros, it was really hard because I just didn't, I was out of the habit of listening to what my body wanted, essentially. And I was just following all of these external rules of what, you know, what I'd been told to track in terms of my calories, what was the lowest calorie option at all times, because when I was on really low calories, it was like, well, I'm not going to spend my macros on like real peanut butter if I can just put a drizzle of that disgusting powdered peanut butter that is just not for me. It's fine. Like if people genuinely like it, that's cool, but like it's not for me. So I was like, oh, like I'm just so reliant on those things. And it just was a lot of unlearning when I was thinking about like good foods and bad foods and how much is too much, and not looking at serving sizes. Even like one serving size of oats is like not even enough for a small child. Like those tiny little sachets or like 30-40 grams is like nothing. And it was scary being like, okay, well, what if I pour in the amount that I really want? Like, is that going to be too much? What's going to happen? Am I going to start eating and never stop? And I did have that initial upswing where I was like, okay, now I've got freedom. Now I don't have that limitation of like, I'm not allowed to have this because it's, you know, going to tip me over my calories. So I had that whole food freedom that I really took advantage of for a while, which was a little different to what I was doing when I was binging, I guess. It was still a large amount of food in the day and a bit of a calorie surplus, but it was like more intentional, more of a choice, not just this kind of blind, like robotically just driven towards the fridge kind of thing. And eventually, like, you know, I had this swing towards being really restrictive. I had this swing the other way into like a lot more food freedom and eating a lot more. And I eventually settled in the middle where I'm like, you know what, now I'm ready to not necessarily like track or be really rigid with it, but to think more intentionally about, okay, just because I want this, I don't know, pizza for dinner, like, is that what I'm going to really enjoy in terms of how it's going to make me feel? Is it too late at night to have that kind of food? How will it affect my sleep? Or, you know, is there too much dairy for me? Because I'm a little bit sensitive to dairy. But when I was like binging, I'd be like, I don't care. Give me a whole tub of ice cream. I'm going to feel like crap anyway. I might as well eat it all. Whereas now I'm like, yeah, like I could eat it. And if I really want to, I can. But also, what's the amount that feels good for me? And I kind of just make that choice, and I'm happy to stop at that because I'm like, all right, I've hit that middle ground between like enough to satisfy the urge, but not so much that it takes away the fun when I start to feel, you know, yucky and uncomfortable about it.
It's so refreshing to have those thoughts. And for those who are on their journey right now to, you know, healing that relationship with food, I just want to remind you that there is a way out. It takes time, but once you get to that place of freedom, it just feels so refreshing knowing that you don't have to rely, like you said, Sami, relying on serving sizes or how many calories. It's literally you eating for the sake of eating, of surviving, of energy. And I love the fact that you've been able to change your mindset around food, going, cool, well, if I'm going to eat this meal, is it actually going to affect my digestion? Is it going to help me sleep? Or is it like little changes are taking, you know, in the different direction? It makes such a big difference instead of us literally just focusing going, is this going to make me fat? Am I going to stay lean? Can I see my abs? Is this, you know, it's quite, what's the word I'm looking for? Disheartening. When you're constantly thinking those type of thoughts like back then.
Yeah, definitely. And I was so worried about like, quote unquote, like letting myself go. I was like, oh, like if I just let myself eat whatever, I'm gonna eat it forever and I'm gonna gain so much weight and I'll never stop. And like, you know, I did gain weight and it was like uncomfortable, I'll be honest. Initially, like I really was not happy with my body for a while. It took me a good long time to really feel settled again. But I feel like now that I'm kind of back to almost where I was when I first started my fitness journey weight wise. I mean, I don't really weigh myself anymore, but I don't think I've changed any time recently. But like, I don't really think about food in that way anymore. I don't really intentionally make an effort to eat in a way to like control or maintain my weight. I just kind of do whatever, and I've got that balance in everything. And my body doesn't really change. Like it maybe fluctuates, you know, up and down a kilo or two here and there. Like usually in winter I'm a little heavier and in summer I'm a little lighter, and I don't really think it's a huge difference, but I've kind of stayed that way for the last couple of years and I haven't had to intentionally do anything about it. So I think for me, this is probably just my natural like set point, which some people don't really believe is a thing, but I'm very much of the belief that I think all bodies have a different set point. You can definitely change it to some extent, but this is where my body feels really comfortable, where my physical health and my mental health are on equal ground of prioritization. Whereas if I'm really trying to change my body, my physical health might get better to some degree initially, but if I take it too far, my physical health declines. If I'm not getting enough food, you can lose your period or have disordered eating. My mental health also often declines in those situations too, and that's not the case for everyone necessarily, but for me, this is my balancing act. And I think foregoing some of my body goals or just making peace with, like, I'm just never going to have abs again, and I am more than okay with that, because I have a good life now and it's just not as important to me. And everyone has their own perspectives, and there are some people that I think really want that and that's important to them, and that's so fine if you can maintain that while also having an enjoyable life and prioritizing both physical and mental health. So if you can have the best of both worlds, that's amazing. For me, that just wasn't the case, and this is where I can have that balancing act. So I kind of just accepted whatever body comes with that, and I feel so much better for it.
You mentioned such a good point about the natural weight, because too often females, well, we're going to speak about females, but too often we get scared of the thought of putting weight on, because we don't want to be looking a certain way than what we perceive ourselves as. And I can so relate to that, because for so many years I was literally just wanting to be the smallest version of myself, be able to see my abs, which, mind you, oh my God, it took me so long to actually get abs. And once I did, I was just like, oh, is this it? Okay, well, how do I maintain this? Well, guess what?
Yeah.
You can't maintain it unless you're continuously training as hard as you can. And if you have good genetics, because we're all built so differently. And some women do naturally have a leaner physique who you can see the abs, where, like myself and yourself, Sami, sometimes we just need to gain a little bit more weight and accept it.
Yeah, it is a hard process though, and it's, I understand why it's challenging. And that's one of the biggest things that keep people stuck in a negative and kind of disordered habit, is that fear of weight gain. And it's very real and very common. And I, never shame my clients for feeling that way. If they're like, I'm not ready to stop this restriction because I'm really worried about weight gain, we obviously try and unpack it together. But I can't promise that they won't gain weight. But it's also not guaranteed that they'll gain weight either. And a lot of the time, funnily enough, with the clients that I work with, which are typically more the overeating disorders, so binge eating and bulimia, in those kinds of disorders, a lot of the time when you restore a more balanced approach to food and reduce those binging and like significant overeating episodes, a lot of the time your body naturally kind of loses weight as a result of that anyway, just by kind of stabilizing things and eating a little more on your like quote unquote good days and not being so restrictive, but eliminating those like bad days where you would just have this massive free for all. And so overall it ends up being like a lower intake anyway, and so much more balanced, and digestion improves because it's more consistent, and sleep improves. So you're not going to bed with this like bursting stomach, and so many things pick up and so many things, get so much better. So it is just one of those really hard things to put it to the side, that fear of weight gain, and it does keep people stuck a little longer than what I think is helpful sometimes. But I understand how scary it is, because I was petrified. I thought everything was going to disappear. I was so worried and I was so self-conscious, and I was like, oh my God, built this business based on looking this way and being so like driven, and this is what I push for my clients, and like let's do an 8-week challenge. And then I was like, well, who's going to want to work with me now? And I'm the girl that's binge eating and gaining weight. And I was like as transparent as I could be without, sending a bad message, obviously. But, I put it out on socials that I was struggling with binge eating, that I wasn't feeling great in my body. I tried to be as honest as I possibly could from like an informational and helpful perspective. I'm usually a pretty open book and don't hide much about what's going on. And that was really hard and really scary. And I did have some people unfollow me, but not anywhere near as many as I thought. And I actually kept growing, and I built this wonderful community and had so much support from my clients and from my followers that were like, thank you for sharing this. And, you'll be right soon. Like, we'll follow along anyway. And I've had people that tell me now that they've like either been following me for all this time, which is, what's 2014 to 2022? How many years is that? 8 years.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's such a long time. So there have been people that have literally followed my life for 8 years. And then there have been other people that have said, hey, like, I've actually just recently started following you again. I actually unfollowed you when you were competing and, you know, found that it was a little triggering, you're a bit obsessive, or, you know, it just wasn't a good place for me. But I'm so glad to see that you're, you know, more positive now and, you know, really enjoying my content now. And I really appreciate their honesty. And I didn't think that I was being so problematic at the time because I was so swept up in it. So I really appreciate that people feel comfortable. Like, that's happened quite a few times. I would say that people have shared that in a very kind way. Just saying, like, you know, glad I can follow you again. Like, you're not psycho like you used to be. And I'm like, great, good to hear, good to know. But, you know, I still, you know, also have a little bit of guilt, I guess, and regret around some of the things that I didn't see as problematic at the time, and that I definitely was a part of the problem, that I wish I could change. But I guess in hindsight, it taught me so much, and it's given me all of the perspective that I have now in order to do better and be better and be one of, I guess, the more positive influences in terms of the fitness industry. So hopefully I'm righting any wrongs that I made.
I can so relate to the guilt side of things, especially, you know, us having a little bit regret around the journey of, you know, going down that bodybuilding route and losing weight and then gaining the weight, being uncomfortable with the weight gain. However, one thing that I also remind myself and my clients is we only could do our best with what we had. Like, we didn't know any different. And unfortunately, we didn't have the resources that everyone has these days. Like, there's a flora of information. Where back in 2014, there was very minimal information there, how to help women in bodybuilding, about rebounding, about reverse cuts. Like, that wasn't a thing back then.
It was like shunned if you did gain weight post-show because people just thought it was like you just have no willpower and you've let yourself go. And so, you know, that was a really hard thing to experience. There was so much like shame and embarrassment around that when you've been this person that's been so strict for, you know, 20 plus weeks, and then all of a sudden you're gaining all of this weight. It was really difficult. Whereas now, I wouldn't say it's like normalized as such. Like, obviously, you know, we know that binge eating is not an ideal behavior to have, but we can see that a lot of the time it is a result of that prolonged restriction. So it could be from a comp prep, it could be just from any kind of diet. There are so many other factors as well that contribute to binge eating that are nothing even to do with kind of dieting as well. But I think there's just so much more information out there about it. It is a little more normalized in that people aren't so ashamed of it. They see that other people are experiencing that same thing. So while, I'd like, there are probably some things here and there that I wish I didn't share in terms of like my more sort of restrictive or like hard on myself moments. But I also did share a lot of the down times at the same time, and you know, put it out there that I was struggling or that I was really hungry and not feeling well, and like do not do what I'm doing some of the time. But yeah, I'm just much more thoughtful about what I post now and really trying to help people more than anything else.
I love that. And it's so rewarding to have that as well right now. Like, as we mentioned at the beginning, it's, you know, being able to have these coping tools to be able to not only help ourselves, but help our clients around this. What is one thing that helped you navigate a better relationship with your body once you gained the weight? Because you mentioned that you really suffered with the idea of you gaining weight and you felt ashamed around it.
Yeah. I mean, I had the blessing of seeing kind of firsthand that the things I thought would go to shit didn't. So when I thought everyone was going to unfollow me and no one was going to work with me, I just kept showing up anyway, and like had sort of that positive experience where even though I had a few comments and a few here and there, like it was not what I thought. So that gave me a lot of faith of like, okay, these fears that I have around weight gain are actually like not substantiated. But I think the biggest thing that I really sort of more intentionally did, which is something that I work with my clients a lot on, is trying to zoom out and not focus so much on my body or on food and see myself as a whole person. And the experience of gaining weight actually really helped with that, because I was like, well, I've hinged so much on my body. I've used it for my marketing and to grow my socials and all of this stuff. And now, like, if I don't have those abs, if I'm not that shreddy girl, who am I? So really kind of trying to sit with that question of who am I and like, what do I have to offer the world? Am I a good coach without that? Can I be inspirational without looking a certain way? All of those things just help me tap into more of like what I do have to offer the world and what I really love about myself that has nothing to do with my body, and all of my knowledge that I've acquired and all of the, you know, really close support that I offer and the great insights and analogies and strategies and all of these things that I have as a coach and as a counselor, they don't change depending on my weight. I could lose 10 kilos or gain 10 kilos right now, and all that knowledge and that ability to work would be exactly the same. And that's the stuff that's making an impact. So, you know, I did that on a personal level as well, and just tried to think about like, who am I as a friend and as a partner, and, you know, all of those things that I actually really liked about myself, and just spent more time focusing on those things. Because funnily enough, the more I focused on my body and my food, especially in that period where I was competing, the more those other things that I liked about myself were pushed to the side. So things like being a good listener and like being really supportive to my friends, like I didn't see them as often, and I was probably distracted every time we were out for food because I'd be like drinking my black coffee and staring at someone else's meal that I wish I could eat, and like not even mentally present a lot of the time. And like when I had that perspective and I was like, shit, I'm not even the person that I want to be. Like I thought all of these great things were going to happen when I had abs and hit my goal weight, and I was like, I'm not even the person I want to be then. And actually now I might not have that one piece of the puzzle of having that dream body, but I actually am far closer to the person that I want to be and the way I kind of want to leave my mark on the world. So that was a really nice thing to kind of learn over time. So I try to share that insight with my clients and have them really do that whole same zooming out. What do you like about yourself? Can we spend more time highlighting those things? What do you know? What can you share? How do you benefit those people around you? Or just what do you like in yourself that you would want to be the person, like you're the person you want to be around? So like, would you be friends with you essentially, or would you do things differently, and just spend time like curating that to be a better person, not just focusing on a good body.
I love that you mentioned that, and asking them the question, like, would you be friends with yourself? And kind of like giggling on the back here going like, well, I would not have been friends with myself back then because I was so miserable, because I was so depleted. I was hating life. I was constantly focusing on food, my image, and just like really minor things that did not matter. And now that I reflect back, I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so much happier now.
Yeah, even looking at like my friendships that I had when I was competing versus now, like I still have some of the same friends that weren't related to bodybuilding anyway, but my like closest best friends in those couple of years that I was competing, I don't even talk to them at all anymore. Like we literally didn't even have anything in common other than we're all just obsessed with the same thing and would like egg each other on, or like, what are you eating today? Like, oh my God, this is so depressing. Or I lost weight, or how'd your skin folds go? And what bikini are you wearing? Like all of those things were just such a, like we lived in such a bubble, and like they were like fun for the time. Nothing, you know, we didn't have any awful falling outs. We just kind of didn't really have much else going on. Whereas now the friendships that I have are so much more fulfilling and just like deeper on so many levels. And we spend such great quality time together and things that like actually matter.
I love that. And you know what? It really matters to having deep and meaningful relationships. And not saying that you didn't have back then, but it was different ways, or well, different ways of looking at friendships. Like you said, you had those similar ways of, you know, connecting with them. But now, because you're no longer doing bodybuilding, it's just like, all right, like I want to have, you know, better connections with people aside from just the way I'm looking, or, you know, how my skin folds have gone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's chalk and cheese now. It's crazy.
Yeah, but it's a wonderful thing just to notice like how much we've grown outside of that. And even though back then it would have been like a massive hurdle for us to overcome, but being able to reflect back and be able to provide, you know, a better service to our clients, making them realize like, hey, cool, like you are going through a really rough time right now, but you are going to be able to manage this in the long run to improve your lifestyle. And speaking of improving lifestyle, I know you're very big about helping your clients with managing their stress. and around emotional eating. So like, what are some coping tools that you're happy to share with, those who are struggling with emotional eating?
I guess really just working out what the trigger is always going to be the first step. So when it comes to like binge eating in general, sometimes it can be about the food. It can be about the mental restrictions, so seeing foods as good and bad, all of those kinds of things. But emotional eating is a big part of binge eating triggers, but also can just kind of be its own thing. And I mean, emotional eating in general isn't inherently a bad thing, which I think is one thing I really try to help my clients make peace with. We literally are born from like day one. We cry, we express our needs of hunger, and we're either breastfed or like bottle fed and held and rocked and hugged and soothed. So we have this like innate kind of link between food and comfort. So it's actually part of being a human to get like pleasure and comfort out of food. It's problematic when it is in kind of like mindless extreme quantities, when it's like maybe detrimental to like your digestion, your sleep, or when it's a reliance on food as a coping tool without any other coping tools. So I try and kind of expand the coping toolbox for my clients and curate the right coping tools, I guess, for what they're experiencing, and say food can be part of that. That can be, something to take a little bit of the edge off and give you a bit of pleasure at the end of the day. But let's also work on, something like mindfulness and meditation, or is physical activity a great outlet for you? Or are you a journaler? Do you need some like music to kind of get you in the bubble and just do almost like a meditation, but in a different kind of way? There are so many different ways that people can, curate their coping tools, and it doesn't have to be like woo-woo meditation stuff if that's not what you're into. It could even just be that maybe like loneliness might be a trigger for someone in terms of emotional eating, and maybe they're busy all day, and then they get home, and if they live by themselves and they're maybe not happy about being single, or they just are living far away from their family or something, if that's a trigger, food might have always been that kind of constant comfort for them. But actually in that moment you're seeking connection and familiarity, and you've got that with food because you've always had that. But also, can you reach out to someone? Can you make plans for the weekend? Can you jump on a phone call with someone that you care about and actually meet that need in a better way? And then it's maybe you have a little bit of chocolate afterwards to just be like, oh, okay, that just kind of completes this moment. But you're not relying solely on like, it's kind of like trying to fit like a square peg into a round hole. And you need to know what shape that hole is in order to find the right peg for it. So I wish I could give you like one succinct answer, but it really is different for everyone depending on what their specific kind of emotion is that they're struggling to deal with. So the first thing is always having to think about, if I am using food as a coping tool, what is it that I'm struggling to cope with? And can I think of something else that might help fill that? Can I either practice that in the moment alongside food, or is it something I can do even preemptively? Like if you know that it's stress, can you take more breaks during the day to go like take a little breather outside for 5 minutes a couple times a day, so that you're not sort of built up and exploding at the end of the day? So the awareness around the underlying difficulty and what you're not coping with is usually going to guide you along a little further.
I love that. It's so helpful. And it reminds me back then when I used to go through my binge episodes, where I felt quite lonely. And it's funny because I was in a relationship as well, but I did feel quite alone on myself, and I couldn't cope with that loneliness. So my trigger was food.
Yeah, and that's really common for people who struggle with binge or any kind of overeating, because it does often come with a lot of like guilt and shame and isolation, because you're kind of a lot of the time embarrassed. You don't want anyone to know what's going on. So then you isolate yourself further. You're like waiting till your partner goes to bed before you can eat, or you do it when, they're out of the house, or it's on the way home in the car and you like sit in the car in the like McDonald's drive-through or something. A lot of the time it happens on your own in secrecy. So if the trigger is loneliness or like isolation, you kind of box yourself into a corner, making yourself more lonely and isolated throughout that moment, instead of going, oh, I'm doing this because I'm lonely and isolated. Do I need to like plan some quality time with my partner, or like, find another way to get around this feeling?
It's literally like diving into that uncomfortable feeling, going, okay, like what is it that I need right now, instead of, reverting back onto food.
Yeah, and it's a tough and confronting thing a lot of the time.
Very.
And that's why I think like being here to guide clients through that is so helpful and like important for them to have that sort of non-judgmental, unwavering support where I'm like, hey, I've been there. Like, I will never judge you if you have a binge. Call me when you're in the middle of it, or you're tempted, or like, let's work through it. Because yeah, I really wish that I had that at the time. So I feel really proud that I have changed and grown and become just such a better person, personally and professionally, I guess, that I can help people in such a meaningful way. So it gives me a lot of like happiness and like job satisfaction, and just like I feel pretty good doing what I do now. So yeah, I love it.
100%. I can so relate to that, because a lot of my clients, when they do struggle with certain things, they will message me and be like, oh my God, this is happening. But we know at the moment of stress, it's not as bad as we think it is. But then as coaches, we're able to show them some of the blind spots and give them a little bit of clarity, going, cool, like, I understand this is how you're feeling. What can we do different? How can you make yourself a little bit more better or feel grounded? So then we can take you away from that, that space that's triggering you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like blind spot is a really key word there, and that when you're in the midst of it, there are so many things that you miss, that you don't see, and having someone there who is non-judgmental and, outside of your head that you can really bounce off, and, they can share those insights or like put some puzzle pieces together for you. So having that support can be really helpful. So if there is anyone that's listening right now, like, this is not a plug for myself necessarily, you don't have to come to me, but I think, if you're with a coach, maybe chat to your coach or reach out to someone that you think might help you, because sometimes it's scary taking that first kind of step in getting help. But it can make things so much easier, so much faster as well, that you can get over this hurdle and just, get the help that you really need, because it is out there. You just have to kind of take that first step.
100%. And I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because too often people think they can do it on their own. But then once they invest in coaches or counselors, they realize, oh, this is actually quite useful, because like we mentioned at the beginning, you're going to be saving yourself time instead of trying to do the research or trying to do the study yourself. It's just like, get someone who's done the work, who knows how to help you with these coping tools. So that way you'll lead a better lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish that I had found the right person, I guess. Back then I would have saved myself a lot of drama, but at least now I've got lots of relatable stories to share with my clients. So that kind of helps them on that like connection level too, to be like, oh, okay, that's less embarrassing because you've done it too.
It's to be honest, like, it's so refreshing for a lot of my clients to hear what I've been through.
Yeah, exactly.
And make them feel a little bit comfortable, going, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not the only one who's going through this. It's just like, no, you're not. But not many people talk about it. And that's why we feel the guilt and shame around it.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's normalizing it to a point in just, this happens to a lot of people, but also like, we do want to make changes, like what can we do? And, when you and I have that insight of how we've improved, like I think that shows as well that pathway to like, you can get better, and it just kind of role models those healthy behaviors. So that's also kind of helpful for people to see.
I love that. So useful. Well, I'm sure our listeners today got a lot of value from today's conversation and making them realize that, hey, it's not only you, there's a collective of women out there who have gone through this, who are going through this. It's just a matter of opening up a little bit about your struggles and noticing what the triggers are, because as you mentioned, usually it's not just about the food, it's the lifestyles that we're leading.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're so right.
I love that. Sami, thank you so much for joining me. Today's conversation has been so much fun. I swear, every time I jump on with a podcast with someone, I learn something new. And today I've learned some good coping tools to help my clients as well.
Oh, I'm so glad I could help.
I love it. So before we head off, where can our listeners find you? How can they work with you?
So best place to find me is through my Instagram, which is Sami Rose, Sami, just one M. I have a link in my bio that has all of my coaching options, as well as to book a counseling session. I do free 15-minute consultations. So if you want to just jump on and have a chat with me and see whether coaching or counseling is a good fit, I can usually give some pointers in that little 15 minutes anyway, and kind of give you some context on what it would be like to work with me. I also do sort of unofficially, I guess, business mentoring for other people in the fitness industry who want to help their clients in a better way. So I can teach them some sort of stress management skills to pass on, or they can kind of bounce some case studies off me as well. So if there are any, professionals in the industry that just want a little bit of guidance in this area, I'm definitely happy to help. But yeah, everything's all through my Instagram. There's lots of different options there in that link. Otherwise, I also answer all of my DMs if anyone just has a little question that you want to pop in.
I love that. Good old Instagram. I tell you what, where would we be without it right now?
Oh gosh, I know. I mean, sometimes I wish I could just throw it all away because it does get a little tiring, but I'm also so grateful for it and like so just happy that I've got, this platform that I've built that I can build a business off and connect with so many people and have all of these great like little Instagram friendships and people that have followed me for so long. Like, it's so wild. It's so great. But yeah, what a blessing.
It is wild how many people follow us and you're like, wow, you've literally gone through my whole life.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my God, you've been through so many breakups and you've been through like moving house and buying a house and all these weight changes and you're still here. And I'm like, wow, you must really like me. Thanks.
I love that. So good. So good. Well, girls, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please make sure that you screenshot it, tag us at the Women's Fitness Academy, tag Sami, tag myself. And then till next time, be sure to know that change is possible and find out what those triggers are.